All right, 101 Part-Time Jobs has now reached 400 episodes. So thank you. Cheers for listening to this independent music podcast. One of the main reasons we've been able to keep going is because of our advertisers. The people that we work with share our messaging in supporting independent musicians and artists. So for the next few minutes, you're going to be hearing some branded messages from companies that we like, that we're working with. Thank you for your support and listening to this show. If you're looking to buy your next instrument, piece of music tech or accessory, look no further than Dawson's. Now with a brick and mortar store on the iconic Denmark Street here in London and online at dawsons.co.uk, Dawson's carries heritage guitars, Harmony, Mono and other major music brands like Fender, Martin Guitars, Marshall, Orange Amps and more. You'll hear on this show how guitars have songs in them. And it's true. I've been playing this Harmony Silhouette with Bigsby that you can hear beneath this. And I've now got to start a new band because the songs are flowing. So if you're looking to pick up something special, head to Dawson's on Denmark Street or online. And with the voucher code 101 Part-Time Jobs, you can claim 5% off the Dawson's online music store when you spend £100 or more. That's voucher code 101 Part-Time Jobs over at dawsons.co.uk. Happy playing! Hey, do you play in bands? I did for the longest time. And I wish that I knew that DistroKid was a thing. I don't even think it existed back then. DistroKid makes music distribution fun and easy with unlimited uploads, and artists keep 100% of your royalties and earnings. 1 million plus artists rely on DistroKid to get their music on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all the major streaming services. When you get DistroKid, you can see a DistroKid bank and withdraw your earnings. You get notified when you've earned royalties and you can withdraw via the app. And you can even check your streaming stats on Spotify and Apple. Get 30% off your first year on DistroKid by going to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. 30% off for your first year. That's not bad. We know it's a tough world out there. Why don't you make it easier for yourself? And to get 30% off that free year as an artist, where you get 100% of your royalties and earnings, go to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. All right, stay with me. I'll be right back after this.
It feels like you can get your credit scores anywhere these days. Random websites, card statements, budgeting apps, heck, even your dog might bark out a few numbers. It's true. Credit Karma isn't the only place you can find them. But we actually do more with your scores to help you find your next financial opportunity. Like a more rewarding credit card, a game plan that helps you pay down debt faster, or a personal loan to help you save more on interest payments each month. Cha-ching! The possibilities are kinda endless. Download Intuit Credit Karma today to get started.
Chronic migraine is 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for adults with migraine with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It prevents, on average, 8 to 9 headache days a month versus 6 to 7 for placebo.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Ask your doctor and visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
Hey, you're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me, Giles Bidder. It's where we hear about the personalities behind the albums that we're listening to, the artists that we're seeing live. And on today's episode, we hear from Chili Gonzales. Chili's new album, Gonzo, came out in September, and he's playing live at the Royal Albert Hall on the 28th of October, joined by Jarvis Cocker, who I'm sure you remember he did an album with, Room 29, in 2017, I think it was. And Chili Gonzales is perfect for 101 Part-Time Jobs, not least because he does his own publishing, sorts out his own record label, has his Gonservatory, which is a music school that he set up in 2018. But because he is someone who is completely unabashed about putting his personality in his music, even when it's a massive risk. We talk about in this episode how some music critics didn't really quite understand Gonzo and maybe took the lyrics very literally and maybe didn't look further and understand the value in its context. But that's what we talk about here, is how lyrics are a vehicle for his personality to come out and how much thought goes in behind his records. So coming up is Chili Gonzales here on 101 Part-Time Jobs. Thank you for being here. We put out 2 episodes every week with exciting and interesting artists. So if you like this chat and you're new here, make sure you click subscribe. After the jump is Chili Gonzales. 101 Part-Time Jobs.
And I always tell journalists or people who are, asking for advice on, what's the best way to get an artist to open up. I would always say, you have to come at it indirectly. You have to either ask the most specific question or a general question that has nothing to do with their work. And then you're going to start to get gems. Yeah. Because not only is it just not pleasant to have to stare at your work in the face and try to put words to it? It's highly unpleasant, to be honest. Not only that, most of us are professionalized at doing it. And so we have not exactly canned answers, but something close to spiel. Mm-hmm. And if someone is like, what made you decide to do a rap album again? You can bet I've answered it 100 times this year. Okay. But if you ask me about 3 words that I used at the end of one of the verses of track 11, well, then I'm going to give you a rich and tapestried answer on why I chose those exact 3 words, So I think this is a great way into a discussion. And I mean, 101 Part-Time Jobs is, it's like, I can't imagine anyone who would say no to a podcast with that title. So somehow you've done well. It kind of reminds me of like Hot Ones. Yeah. Where, it's like the guy asks really penetrating questions, very specific, with the added bonus of, people are in this like highly strange situation of suffering from eating hot sauce.
Yeah. And food is that's an exchange of ideas.
Exactly. Breaking bread.
Yeah. I mean, you've helped me. You've done my job for me there, talking about specific words in lines and songs. Time is a flat circle and it looks like a pizza and I'll be having extra cheese.
Thank you so much. I'm very proud of that line because it's coming off the heels of talking about the past and the future. And I think I say that the future is bright like an Xmas tree. And, every line, of course, to me means a lot more than it might mean to the listener. But when I say the future is bright like a Christmas tree, that was written at the end of 2021 when I had just finished a year because of the pandemic kind of was a bit strange. I did put out a Christmas album at the end of 2020 that was highly successful. I had just done a tour that was, had been delayed by a year. So it actually came out on the pandemic Christmas of 2020, but the tour finally happened at Christmas 2021. And that album had really kind of brought some security to a precarious situation of being an independent artist with my own label. The album was such a success that, I kind of got the news at the end of 2021 that this Christmas album kind of saved the company. So the future being bright like an Xmas tree is where it's coming from. Because before that, I say you can't change the past, but the future is bright like an Xmas tree. Then, speaking of time, I say, well, time is a flat circle, the famous line from True Detective Season 1, uttered by Matthew McConaughey. And when you're thinking of a flat circle, well, somehow the next jump was to pizza, and the next line after that refers to cheese, which is a rap slang for money. And then I refer to the fact that I'm making 20 G's for a show, yes, please. So the way to get from time to money is through the flat circle of a pizza. And what's really annoying is that, you try not to read the reviews, but here and there, someone said, yeah, he raps about pizza. I say, oh, come on, man. This is obviously someone who's never listened to a rap song in their life if they think I'm rapping about pizza in that moment. Because, the references are legion. And it's a way of expressing gratitude for emerging from a situation that, and musicians were affected along with almost everybody else. We all had a socially but also financially precarious time during the pandemic. Everyone was questioning their identity and whether they can continue doing what they're doing. And so those lines really do mean something to me in an autobiographical way, despite the fact that on the surface, of course, it might just seem like I'm rapping about pizza or making some timely references to some nice cultural products like True Detective. But in reality, that's a deep expression of gratitude for having had my company saved by the pandemic and have come out the other end where I'm still able to make a good living performing on stage.
Having the humor be the vehicle to something deeper, differing on different depths of different tracks. That's a common theme with you. There's something that you do, you're funny, and there's heart in the funny.
Well, all good comedy exposes a serious truth. We laugh because a joke makes us think about something that we avoid. Usually it's like death but if you really analyze any joke that really works, and I'm not talking about dad jokes or just puns or, dime a dozen jokes, but I mean, deeper humor, the great comedians, whether it's, some amazing British ones, Stuart Lee and Bill Hicks, who's American, but more or less adopted by the Brits as a British comedian, he's an honorary British comedian in a way. And you really see that there's either some social satire there or there's something much deeper that ruminates on some of the horrible contradictions of the human condition. So I think all good humor should do that. It just surprises me that outside of rap, humor is still kind of segregated off and seen as light, or you have kind of musical comedians, the Tim Minchin types, who, Tim Minchin is really good at what he does, but there's not that many people who would probably listen to his music on a rainy day or on a train ride with the headphones on, or who might say, Tim Minchin's music got them through a difficult period. People will say that, for example, about my piano music, but the medium of rap has always also used humor. Rap couplets are called punchlines. You look at someone like Lil Wayne, and he has great lines like "Real G's move in silence like lasagna," because lasagna, of course, has a silent G. But you can really write a dissertation beyond that pun, which is a bit of a groaner. You get into, well, what does it mean for a G to be silent, a G being a kind of gangster figure who will not boast about himself being a gangster. So he's saying, well, the people who speak about being gangsters probably aren't gangsters. And if you're really a gangster, you're probably not telling anyone about it. That's the, the position of the silent G. But even more, I've read, paragraphs and paragraphs, people saying that lasagna is actually a homonym for the laws on ya. So the laws moving on you, the laws being the police. And so real G's move in silence like the police who creep up on you. And it gets very deep when you start to analyze. And, we saw that with the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef, people going so deep into every line. And a good rap line is funny and has subliminal multiple meanings, many of which maybe the one who wrote it doesn't even realize. And that's the beauty of it. All poetry, I think, has the capacity to function on those levels. So I'm just surprised that outside of rap, humor is still more or less frowned upon.
I think there's a tension there between writers like myself who maybe if they're doing their job not very well, listen to the record very quickly or once, hopefully at all, and come up with the blunt meaning that they get on first impression. And that's totally at odds with making a record or a fan's experience of the record where you listen to it 10 times and you find those new meanings. I suppose that's something that when you're making a record or you're making a project that you just got to put out of mind.
Well, no, you keep it in mind because you want there to be enough superficial elements in there that it can still work on the superficial level. I respect and accept, because I have no choice, the way music has gone, the way people's attention spans have changed, and we gain a lot also from that. So I'm not saying it was better before when people had more brain space to devote to multiple listens. It's just kind of the way it is, and it's up to us, the artists, to adapt and to respect how people consume and listen to music now. So I try to put in enough that it can grab them, and that if they decide to go deeper, they'll be rewarded mightily for it because of my obsession with self-mythologizing and making sure that every line really is speaking from the heart for me. There's a lot of funny couplets and punchlines that I write that do not make it into the final songs because, of course, I do love to write the punchlines. I do love to see, as a little mental exercise for myself, how can I incorporate this little word shift? But then at the end, if it doesn't really represent something that I can emotionally really get behind, of course, it's going to get left behind. It stays in the notebook and never makes it, onto the actual song. But it's the same with my instrumental music, which sometimes is beloved by people as background music. I wrote a whole book about guilty pleasures where I was trying to defend background music. When I was on your podcast last time, I spoke about being a lounge pianist, playing in hotel bars, and most notably a lingerie shop for elderly ladies in Toronto. And I earned a great deal of respect for how music can be useful to people, even in an unconscious way. So I'm not going to hate on people who only listen once and get it superficially. I try to cater to them as well.
Where do you find yourself, having your kind of senses perked up at specific, directors or comic books or radio or TV, whatever it could be, something that's on here in your home or when you're traveling that will put you in a good place to write and to find those punchlines, to stumble upon those lines?
Well, in that case, I must say, you kind of have to have the beat playing in your head, the invisible beat to when you're writing the lyrics, you sort of unconsciously choose, I guess the most obvious word for it would be the flow. But what that really refers to is what is the rhythmic pattern that you're essentially choosing as the skeleton of your rap. And, on a song like Surfing the Crowd, where about 80% of the lines all have the same 3-syllable internal rhyme, starting with the line, surfing the crowd is like sex to me. So you have this 3-syllable pattern, and I break it once in the middle of the song, only for about 8 lines. But other than that, I think there's something like maybe 70 or 80 punchlines that all go with, centipedes, century, open sesame, etc., celebrity, psychotherapy. It's all and so everything kind of conforms to this enemy. That's the flow. Here and there, you break it. No pattern can survive unchallenged in a song, otherwise it gets to be predictable. So you're always looking for that mix of satisfaction and surprise. And so if you have that in your mind, you kind of need the beat playing in your head. So it wouldn't really make sense, at least in my case, to have ambient, music or talk or, I'm not going to put on some Vivaldi and write rap lyrics as much as that's a nice image of me in my dressing gown and slippers drinking a cognac and listening to 16th century Baroque string music. That's not really what's going to do it. I write a lot on trains. I write while walking. The rappers who are most well known for writing their raps without writing them down are Jay-Z and Lil Wayne. And when you hear about their process, they kind of pitch it as, well, we're making music. We're not writing poems. So you get closer to the feel of how does it sound? What does the mouth feel? Does it roll off the tongue? Is it musical? If you remove the distancing element of the page, where the page can seduce you into perhaps being too technical. Now, Eminem famously does use paper when he writes, and one might say, "Oh, you can hear it because it's a lot more technical and it's harder to sing along with." But you hear Lil Wayne and Jay-Z raps; they're instantly kind of anthemic. And I guess that's due to the fact that they're proceeding directly to the performative musical part of the rap, as opposed to the literary part, which kind of adds the step on the page. So I tend to want to do it on the page, but I force myself more and more to go out for a walk and do it the Jay-Z, Lil Wayne way, see how far I get. And then just make little recordings onto my phone through my, my little headphone microphone as I go. And then maybe when I get home, I kind of, can appreciate that. Songs like Gonzo, right off the top of the album, they are a bit more simple. They're a bit more catchy. And those lyrics, for example, were written while walking. And I think you can kind of almost hear it. You hear this bongo pattern that has this andante, andante being tempo of walking in Italian in classical music, and you have this gonzo. You can really imagine me taking donzo, bravado, in a bathrobe. It's kind of walking music.
Yeah, and languages. Speaking different languages. Schickimicki, a German line which I really like. My partner's German, and we'll be with her family. Be like, oh no, this is the Schickimicki street. This is the middle of the town centre.
Yeah, it just means posh, right? Yeah,
and it's like, I love those kinds of. Yeah, speaking other languages is always going to be magical, because there are so many different words in German or French that describe things that you can't really do as succinctly in English.
Yeah, I mean, what would we say in English other than posh? In Canada, we would have, in my parents' generation, we might have said hoity-toity. Yeah. So, and shikimiki. So there's something about these rhyming words, these infantile constructions that are meant to kind of poke holes in what is perceived as the pretension of rich areas or rich behavior. And I think that's very interesting. It's like taking them down a peg a little bit to say, I'm going to use this almost schoolyard taunt sounding phrase. It's rare that you hear someone try to take down someone posh with a word that posh people would use. You kind of have to approach it from the other end of things, and what is more demeaning than to be taunted in a sort of schoolyard bully kind of word like hoity-toity or schickimicki. It certainly infantilizes the pretension of the posh people in question, doesn't it?
Money doesn't buy taste.
Pardon me?
Money doesn't buy taste.
Yes, that's for sure. I mean, I remember a friend of mine said, you never hear a classy person use the word classy. So I don't know.
Right. I got told off when I was younger when we said something was, well, posh. My mum said, don't say that because it's rude. And I think common as well. People will be like, oh, that's common. Like, that's rude as well.
Or vulgar.
Writing about Richard Wagner, is that something that you had that been circulating around your mind a little bit, writing about that kind of theme of modern day fascism and Kanye West and Twitter and where everything's at, where, we're not just talking about the States, but, in France, people have been voting for right wing. There are different reasons. It's a bit of a mess. And so is Richard Wagner, when you were thinking about writing about him and then writing about him, did you want to put yourself to rest of that, or did you want to start a discourse with that? You might have not even had any of those kinds of thoughts apart from just writing.
Yeah, it's I went to see Wagner operas when I was 16. My dad is a huge Wagner fan, but my dad is also a Jewish man, so there was already a bit of a contradiction there for me, because Wagner famously wrote an anti-Semitic, very hateful book called Judaism in Music, in which he's basically discrediting the idea that Jews could be artists or have anything to say. And when I found this out, I kind of asked my dad, you as a Jewish man, how can you be a fan of this composer, no matter how great his music is. And he said we have to try to separate the art and the artist. I think try was an important part of that, because I think it's not as easy as turning a switch and having all the perfect opinions either way. It's not easy to say, well, I'm just going to ignore everything I know about Woody Allen and watch one of his movies in which a character then played by Woody Allen proceeds to then have a relationship with a teenager, like in Manhattan, for example. That is not as simple as just saying, I'm going to ignore that. It's also not easy to turn a switch and say, I'm never going to watch a Woody Allen movie again, because maybe if you happen to be a big Woody Allen fan, I'm not, but if you're a big Woody Allen fan, maybe you saw a movie at a certain time in your life and it, maybe you fell in love with someone and you went to see that movie. I have strong emotional memories of the remix to Ignition by R. Kelly. Yeah. So I'm not perfect, even though I highly condemn R. Kelly's personal behavior. I'm not able 100% to say I'll never listen to it again. Just like, even though I try to be a vegetarian, I sometimes eat meat, and I disappoint myself because I'm human and I'm imperfect. So the song just began with "Fuck Wagner," to be honest. And I was like, what do I do with that? And I kind of started writing the chorus, but then I realized, I'm basically taking on the kind of moral high ground that everybody does online, and just saying, well, fuck this guy. I'm offloading essentially a bunch of negative feelings onto someone who, in a sense, is an easy target and not there to defend himself. Also because he's been dead for a long time, we should say. As I started to write the song further, I started to question myself, and I say, when I say fuck Richard Wagner, it's cheap and it's easy. I'm a clown in the media circus on TV, poking holes in myself. And then at some point I arrive at, well, if we're going to say fuck Wagner, then we have to say fuck Chili and fuck everybody. We're all trolls, we're all triggered, and we're all Richard. And that, I guess, is where I ended up and thought, now this is a song, because now at least I'm saying, this is the starting point. The starting point is to acknowledge that we all have a bit of a monster in all of us, which is a recurring theme on the album, also in Open the Kimono and other songs. And if we start from there, then maybe we can continue the discussion about what to do with the great art from horrible people. But it's certainly not a call to cancel Richard Wagner. And yeah, it's been percolating these last few years, not only because I live close to a Richard Wagner Strasse in Cologne, which I'm currently trying to get changed to Tina Turner Strasse, by the way.
How does that work?
That's going well. We have like 15,000 signatures, and I've made what's called a Bürgeranfrage, which maybe means a citizen's request to change the name, and it's going to go through a very slow bureaucratic process. But Tina Turner did live in Cologne for almost 10 years, so I wanted to have something positive to, propose. If we're going to take Wagner's name off, at least I wanted to come with something fun and positive.
Brilliant.
And of course, Kanye West being in so many ways the modern day Wagner, clearly one of our greatest living artists, as Wagner was in his time, also going off the deep end and going down an anti-Semitic and other hateful rabbit holes. So it all just kind of accumulated that, I guess, with that fuck Wagner phrase in my notebook. But a song like that, it takes like 6 to 8 months to fully finish. A song like Neoclassical Massacre, in which I take on kind of algorithm culture and try to answer some of the questions I've had about what does it mean to be an artist in the age of the algorithm now. As a defender of background music, what do I think about all these Spotify playlists, and what does it mean to have a music that people use and are used as a kind of new kind of music, music being a music that was meant to lull you into lingering longer in the supermarket, for example, and buy more products. And now we have this kind of neoclassical piano music, this algorithm music that kind of promises you relief from the fast-paced feeling of being online and information overload, but very insidiously actually keeps you online longer. So again, that took me some months to try to figure out what is my role in this. I did the solo piano record in 2004 before neoclassical was a thing. There was no algorithm back then. How do I feel about this? So these songs that have a real topic, they just take a very long time to write, and others come a bit quicker when the topic is a little more personal.
Staying on that topic of communication, really, and like moving forward in the time, everything feels like it's moving so quickly now. As in, technology is just moving far more rapidly than it ever has done before, and the way that we are isolated and we'll have people will have parents on their Facebooks and having these big kind of arguments. And don't want to stay on this topic too long, but I just want to note that I read a book recently by a guy called Nihal, who's on BBC 5 Live, and he does these great interviews on a podcast called Headliner, and he wrote this book. It's called like Ways to Talk or something, and it really struck me how conversation as an antidote to sloganism is helpful. And I say that now in a conversation with you because that's what music does. Music's a conversation.
I mean, especially rap. I always say that rap's greatest innovation was that it approximates how people speak to each other rather than being an internal monologue, which is what most of singer-songwriter music was up until rap came along. Rap, and that's why rap sounds like speaking. In fact, it's not speaking. Rap is extremely musical. Even the rappers that seem like they're not singing are using their voices in highly sophisticated ways of how they place themselves relative to the instrumental and the music of the instrumental. So it's an illusion that it sounds more like speaking than singer-songwriter music. But that illusion is important because rap represents how we speak to one another, which is why it's full of braggadocio and a lot of false paths and a lot of intentional misrepresentation, a lot of fantasy fulfillment, because that's how we are when we speak to each other. When we interact with each other, there is a certain different mask that we're all wearing as soon as we interact, and rap is the musical form of that mask. But that mask is important. There's no way out of it. There's no way that conversation can ever 100% accurately represent the internal monologue, because our internal monologue, for better or for worse, is trapped in our own brains. I think it's a beautiful thing that we have this difference. Doing therapy is a way of bringing the internal monologue out into the world by speaking it, but that's in a supervised context. Maybe writing lyrics for many people is that as well. I think, people like Feist or Jarvis, great singer-songwriters that I work with, are kind of working with that. But rap, in most cases, without like oversimplifying or generalizing, in most cases, it's a musicalization of how you would speak to someone and try to persuade them of what you believe, or to convert them to believing a fantasy about yourself.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because we do hide things from each other. We do lie to we lie to the ones we love most. We hide the things that we don't like about ourselves in the workplace, for example.
Yeah, there's a huge filter that no human is capable of truly lifting, because to jump over the void to another person, it's literally has to go through a process, and that process doesn't demean at all what comes out of the other end. As you said, conversation is it's how we have society. If conversation didn't exist, then we would literally just be a collection of isolated people, which arguably you're saying we're in danger of becoming, I suppose. But I wonder if, I'm sure people have studied the way that people communicate online, but I think it's pretty obvious that the kind of veil of half anonymity that you get when you're writing online allows you to lash out in different ways that I don't think most people would dare to do when there's a human being in front of them. I don't generally engage with trolls, but here and there would be something that I felt I needed to respond to, because I just had to viscerally respond over the years when I've, released something or said something in an interview and have someone come at me with something so violent, but also just triggering me in a way. And in every single case, they wrote back like, oh, I wrote that last night when I got home. I really didn't mean for it to be that way. I think I was just in a really frustrated mood. I'm actually a huge fan and I really respect what you do. 10 times out of 10. I've never had a troll dig in when I've confronted them. So there's something about online discourse that maybe it's a new type of animal that we haven't identified. It's not the internal monologue that we can never truly share except in a shrink's office under supervision. It's not either the beautiful mask of conversation that I'm referring to that I think is best represented by rap. It's something else, and I don't like it.
You mentioned earlier at the start of our chat how that Christmas record was a surprise, what would you want to say, like bump? A surprise bump, a surprise red letter day. I understand that when you're making all the time, there's not a direct communication or conversation between what you're making and how much you're getting paid for it. So when you do get, that bump or get that red letter day, what take me through the kind of emotions you feel when something does gets to that point where it brings in a certain amount of cash or press or attention. Take me through how you feel.
I mean, the only true feeling of validation that I can trust that nourishes me in a way that feels like it's not fast food is at the end of a successful concert, because it's happening in the room. I have the people for 2 hours. Most of them are not looking at their phones because I have the luxury of having a somewhat polite, maybe older audience. I'm playing in places where it would maybe be gauche to look at your phone 100% of the time. So I'm lucky enough to be able to take people away from that distracted world for a couple of hours and really tell kind of a nuanced story that tries to bring all the threads of my obsessions, which are, of course, going from the sort of whisper of the most sensitive piano music I do to the most bombastic, provocative stuff of, for example, the Gonzo album or the other rap albums, along with some collaborations that touch on electronic music and pop music and other things like that. Master classes, all the disparate elements of what I do feel like they make sense, and I'm able to tell that story. A great concert is like eating the most wonderful meal with wonderful people. It really is one of life's great feelings. Everything else will touch on my ego, will touch on my avarice, will touch on some insecurities and assuage them or not. Just as a bad review can touch me ego-wise in a way that I'll kind of obsess over it and like, why did that guy say I'm rapping about pizza? It can stick with me because it represents something. It's the feeling of I'm misunderstood. I put all this work into it. Why can't people see? These are not. I'm not proud of these feelings, but of course they're there. And of course a bad concert. That's like when your dick won't get hard, and that's when you're just like, oh my God, there's something wrong, and this will not be fixed until the next time I do it right. And so again, I would come back to the concert as the only event where I can really trust the feeling I get, positive or negative. The rest is just comes and goes, and you'll forget about the reviewer who said that thing about rapping about pizza within a few days. I happened to read it 2 days ago, so it's still fresh. As is, the fact that Drake just posted a story of an interview I did with a German rap website where I was describing how Drake works very positively, and just randomly Drake, who I've worked with a handful of times, somehow came upon it. Someone must have sent it to him. He's had a rough year. He's probably thinking, I can use some love. Here's a guy singing my musical praises. And he posted the story to his, I don't know how many zillions of followers. And now I'm having a little bit of a moment online. I woke up this morning, I thought, why do I have 2,000 new followers since last night? Why are there all these comments? And in my groggy state, I realized Drake has storied this excerpt from an interview. It's a great feeling. It's an adrenaline rush. Endorphins are running high. A bunch of rappers started following me. This is a good day, but this is not going to feed me or nourish me in a meaningful way beyond 48 hours from now. The next time I'm really going to be nourished is going to be when I kill the concert.
It seems to me like there's like some cognitive dissonance between like what goes on online, or even, you know, people who you don't know buying the record, listening to the record, spending their Sunday with the record. Because you can't, you can imagine it, but you can't really see it.
Oh, that's what's frustrating about it. That's why I don't consider myself a great practitioner of recording in certain ways. Or at least there's something inherently frustrating about it to me, because it's like a time capsule. You're making something, and its end point is something you will never truly witness or be able to feel out. Whereas in the concert, I feel the way the room is going, and I can go towards it, I can go against it, I can play off of it, I can play to it. And that feels so much more real, of course. And I guess that's why I always said I'm an entertainer. The entertainer is someone who doesn't exist without the audience, is what I always said. Maybe some other musicians are more like painters. They paint, and they understand that the painting will hang somewhere and people will interact with it, but they've made their peace with what that process is. I've never really made my peace with it. There's always something a little that leaves me sur ma faim, like the French people say. My hunger is never quite satisfied for, did I really communicate what I wanted to communicate? And yeah, I guess that's why I come back to the culinary and gastronomical metaphor of, I'm only truly nourished when I've experienced that with the people in front of me.
Looking forward to this live show on the 28th, end of this month, at the Royal Albert Hall. Last time I went there was to see a Home Alone orchestra play along with the film, because I didn't realize it at the time. One of my favorite films, when I think of Christmas, I think of hanging out with my brother and my sister.
Is it John Williams?
Yeah. And there's only 2 or maybe 3 like recorded sort of pieces of music on there that aren't this orchestra that did the soundtrack. And I saw them do this orchestra, and the film was playing in the background. And imagining you playing there, your Christmas record, who you are, your audience, and the kind of people who they are, and how undoubtedly they'll walk into that place, that venue, and think, whoa, you know, and you really sort of, you breathe it in, something about that building. How do you prepare for something like that? Right now, we're a couple of weeks away from it. How are you looking towards it right now? What's going through your mind when you're thinking about that show?
I must say, I don't have a first-hand relationship with the reverence for this venue. I know it because, you know, there's the Olympia in Paris, there's the Philharmonie in Berlin, there's places I've played where I viscerally understand it. I guess I'm just not really quite in London enough and English enough to understand it. But as I started to tell people, because it was, of course, our booker and promoter who said, okay, let's do Royal Albert Hall now. This is the moment. And I was like, okay, great. But I don't really see how is it truly different from Royal Festival Hall, which I've already filled and played a handful of times. But I have since understood that there is, you know, when I say I'm playing there, people are like, oh.
And you get to experience for the first time, by the way. I often think when people say, oh, I don't know that record, you know, they almost apologize. It's like, no, you get to hear it for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, there's something beautiful in that. So you're going to experience Royal Albert Hall for the first time.
Absolutely. You know, I'm planning to have some guests on stage with me, people from my musical family, but also some people that the audience might not expect. Still working out all those details, but of course it's an important show. I don't play in London that often, and I'm really currently, I would say, in the next 3 weeks, going to get very precise about, you know, we played in Edinburgh at the International Festival in August, and it was the first time I played this material for an English-speaking audience. I really mostly have played in Germany and France and places like that throughout the year as building up to the album as the singles came out. And of course, it's very exciting because, of course, every line of the raps gets understood in a more internalized and deeper way by a native English-speaking audience compared to a German audience who speak very good English. A French audience, not so much. So with the French, it's more they get a feeling. With the Germans, they get a feeling and quite a bit of verbal information. But of course, native English speakers get a whole other window into it. And I was kind of shocked by the laugh lines and the gasps and the, there's certain little pauses I leave in, especially in the Fuck Wagner song. I have a line where I say, because Wagner was, impugning the ability of Jewish people to be poets at one point in the book. He said a Jew poet couldn't be a true poet. But have you heard Hotline Bling? A Jew wrote it. And when I do this in Germany, crickets. In France, what's quieter than crickets? I don't know. But when I did in Edinburgh, it just got such a reaction. It was a little bit delayed. And the way the song is constructed, there's a little awkward 2.5 second silence at the end of each 4 lines of that song. And I was thrilled. I got off stage. I thought, finally, because when I wrote that line, I thought, I'm going to find a Jew poet that people don't really immediately register as a Jew poet. So it has this added little delay of a time bomb where people have to kind of remember or know that Drake has a Jewish mother and therefore Drake is Jewish and wrote Hotline Bling, one of the great, masterpieces of pop music of our time. And so there's a lot of brain processing that has to happen. So of course in Germany it just misses the mark. And when people slowly over those 2.5 seconds got it and I heard it happen in real time, it was kind of fulfilling what I'd always dreamed of when I wrote the line.
Could it put you off if you're playing to a click? Do you play to a click?
I do not play to a click.
So if there's a laugh and you want to let the laugh fill the room a little longer, you can.
To a certain extent, I have my musicians on stage with me, but in the case of Fuck Wagner, I do perform that song usually with just the timpani accompanying me. I have a timpani on stage just for one song. Timpani being a very bombastic orchestral instrument that Wagner really loved. And the song is mostly timpani vocal on the album, but that gets reduced to strictly timpani voice. Probably the only rap song performed with a timpani in history. It's a dubious honor, but it's something.
You got to play with Andre 3000.
You mean flute and timpani?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that album is fantastic, and what he moved the Overton window of what an artist can do in terms of boldness, especially in the rap world where people tend to be audience conscious, sometimes to a fault, and they often feel like, well, at the very least I have to deliver a minimum of what people expect from me. Change happens slowly for most rap artists, but for him to come out like that after so long, after over a decade of not releasing anything other than the occasional 16 bars here and there on someone else's song, just as a move, that was like heavily inspiring to a lot of musicians, I think, who always need to be reminded that how radical you change is always up to you. Yeah. I happen to have made a brand out of very heavy shifts from one album to the next because I need to follow where my muse takes me, but also if something works unexpectedly, like a piano album, it's because I took a risk and made a piano album at a time when I was known for doing electro rap, kind of provocative. One might even call it electro clash from the early 2000s. And that piano record, if it taught me anything, it's keep on doing those risks. The wrong lesson to take would be only do piano music now. Because if I had done that, I would have wanted to hold on to whatever meager electro clash success I had and only done that. And Andre 3000, I think, showed that it's really in the control of the artist. It's just a matter of their courage and their ability to court failure and whether they're willing to face up to that. I don't have a lot of time for artists complaining about, being locked into a way of working or producing something, because you can always come back to it. There's a lot of people who don't want to hear me rap. I literally see it very, very often on a YouTube comment or somewhere like that, even though I'm not looking for it. It just, I'll happen to see it. There's quite a few people out there who are like, I love his piano music. I wish he wouldn't do this. And I just want to tell them, well, A, you're not the boss of me, as a 10-year-old might say. But number two, go listen to the piano records. Yeah. There's a lot more out there. There might be some live piano stuff you don't even know. If you dig deep, I have a very big catalog, and a lot of it is on the piano. And I'm going to get back to it. But you know what? When I get back to it, it's because I want to do it, because I sincerely get obsessed with piano music again, and because that album has to be pure fire. Solo Piano 4, whenever it comes, has to take its place with the other three. And those are 8 or 9 years apart in each case. And there's a reason for that. I can't suddenly just say, well, this is what you like from me. Yes, as you like, Governor. No, that's unfortunately not how I can work. I'm not a jukebox. I'm not a high class whore. You're gonna have to wait.
Jobs! Chili, thanks so much for the chat. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me back. Are there many guests who have come back?
Probably, I've spoken to someone who maybe 3 times. That's max. Only one person I can think of.
Okay.
So you are in the 2 club.
Okay.
We've gone around it. We've gone the circuit twice.
I'm in the 202 part-time jobs club.
You are nearing 400. You're probably going to be about 402. So,
how's that?
Because episode 400 is in 2 weeks. When is it coming out? You might be close to 400.
Okay. No, I just meant doubling 101.
Doubling 100. I didn't even get
into
that.
202 part-time jobs.
And then, well, maybe we should put you 404.
Okay.
Or an 808. 808.
Oh, see? Okay. Yeah.
Just to end with, coming up towards Christmas. Christmas is a funny time. It's, I personally, I find it quite difficult. Not quite sure why. I don't really have a proper reason for it. When you go into Christmas, what do you do to keep sane? What do you keep yourself busy with? The music industry shuts down at Christmas, so people don't email from December the 1st.
I was just a non-Christmas practitioner. I didn't go back to Canada. I would basically stay home, and I often made music over Christmas, to be honest.
I should say holiday time, really. Yeah.
Sure. And of course there's this many people are going back home, and they go back to maybe even a house that they grew up in. So I think there's a certain weird dissonance between the person that you are the rest of the year, and then you're kind of falling back into the role you have in your family, and that can be uncomfortable for people. There's moments where you just want to escape and get the hell out of there because you're witnessing family patterns happening. So that's the dissonance, along with the fact that there's a lot of kind of propaganda that this is a time for family and you should feel good and you should feel a lot of love. But you're actually feeling a much more complicated cocktail of emotions than what the John Lewis commercial is telling you to feel, let's say. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of it. But, and I don't get too personal very often, but, I have a daughter, and I think seeing Christmas through the eyes of a kid brings you back to the good, naive part of it. I started playing piano again in around 2018, 2019 at some Christmas parties where, my daughter would have her friends and their families over, and we would do big sing-alongs. And that led slowly to the idea over those couple of years, I should do a Christmas record. And I slowly started to record stuff and was about to release it in 2019, but it was a little too soon. It wasn't finished. I thought, I'll put it off till 2020. That'll be a normal Christmas. Then, of course, we know what happened. But weirdly, because of that extra pressure put on Christmas by the pandemic, my version of a Christmas album, which was very introverted and even turned some of the songs into minor key, kind of more melancholic, nostalgic versions, weirdly, that was one of the reasons that I think that Christmas album worked so well, because it really offered a different way of dealing with Christmas music rather than the forced optimism and the, holding up a smile with your fingers yeah, everything's fine, everything's great. It was kind of no, you're allowed to go to your room and feel weird. And now you're going to hear a minor version of of Jingle Bells that suddenly feels like it's, Christmas in Poland in 1938, Again, I'm using humor to illustrate a point that Christmas has a lot of melancholy in it. And by tapping into that, I unexpectedly created a pandemic hit album.
So now is your Christmas, you've affected your own Christmas. Your own Christmas has been touched by your own music.
Yes, except now my daughter is approaching teenage years, and so Christmas for her is changing as well. It's not quite the same level of magic that it would have when she was, below the age of 10, let's say. And so as I kind of have taken my view on Christmas, and by the way, I'm a non-religious Jew, but, you can't avoid Christmas, can you? Especially with a kid. It's essentially a capitalist holiday rather than a Christian one at this point.
For sure.
But seeing it through that lens of childlike wonder is slowly starting to fade as it fades in my daughter. So I'm not sure where it's going to end. Let's see what happens in a few months.
That's really, totally. I live in Greenwich, or even walking in the parks, that kind of helps me put me into the holiday spirit. Or the local markets are good. If you're lucky enough to live near a market, that's a good place to go. Yeah,
and the way that life slows down at Christmas in certain ways, things close, the music industry shut. I think that's rather a good thing. There's very few occasions, again, where the flow of information and rhetoric and pace of life in general slow down. So I'm glad that at least has a chance to happen a couple times a year.
So that was Chili Gonzales here on 101 Part-Time Jobs, just ahead of his show at Royal Albert Hall, happening on the 28th of October, where he'll be joined by Jarvis Cocker. His album Gonzo is out now, and thank you so much for being here. I love doing these chats. I love hearing about the personalities and stories behind these artists, and I hope you do too. See you later this week with an episode with Elias Ronnenfeld of Norway's Ice Age, who's about to release a fantastic solo album.
101 Part-Time Jobs is hosted by Giles Bidder and produced by me, Olivia Swash. This has been a Mighty Moon Media production.
Help? O'Reilly Auto Parts can help. Need advice? We've got advice. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Exceptional customer service. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.